Hello and welcome back to a new video, and in today's video we are going to be talking about some of the books that I read recently, more specifically all the books that I read between December 2025 and February 2026. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Carol, and in this channel we talk mainly about books and occasionally about other stuff as well. But for today's video we are going to be focusing on talking about some of the books that I read recently, or actually all the books I read recently. Some of these books will be on videos, others have already been on videos that have been published, and there are some that will be only in this video for now. So for the books that will be featured only in this video, I will give you a more detailed review, and for the books that have already been in videos, I will just tell you which video it is. So if you are curious about it and about my opinions, you can go have a look on those videos, and in those videos, in those vlogs, I will talk a little bit more about the books and my opinions on them. But let's start talking about the books, because I have quite a bit of books to talk about. You read quite some books in the past few months, so let's start in chronological order. And the first book that I finished reading in December 2025 was Project Hail Mary by Weir. This is one of those books that have already been in video, but essentially Project Hail Mary is a science fiction. It is a very accessible and a very popular science fiction where we follow this scientist, this man, that one day he wakes up in the middle of space and he doesn't know what he's doing in space because he doesn't even remember his name. He has no idea what is going on, and we follow in this journey as this main character figures out who he is, what he's doing in space, and what is going on. And throughout this book we find out more about the space, about the situation, but also how our main character ended up in space. Before I start talking a little bit more about my opinions on this book, there is a movie about this book that will be released, I believe, I'm not exactly sure which date it will be released in the US or the countries or where I live, but I know there is a movie with Ryan Gosling that is about to be released by the time I'm filming this video. And I watched the trailer. The trailer is incredible, but if you want to read this book spoiler free, which I highly recommend, I'm a person that loves spoilers, but for this book in particular I think it is better to go into this book without knowing much about it. So don't watch the trailer unless you read the book, because the trailer gives up some important plot points, it gives some important spoilers about what is going on in the book. But essentially, Project Hail Mary was one of the highest rated books on my TBR, and there is a reason why this book is so loved by almost every single person that reads it. It's because it's just such an amazing book. It is a sci-fi, but again, accessible sci-fi. It makes you feel a lot of things. It makes you think about the state of the earth and about your connection, human connection, and it's just such a wonderful book. I knew it was a highly rated book. I knew it was one of the highest rated books on my TBR at the time, and there's a reason for that. I loved it. I ended up giving Project Hail Mary 5 stars. And then the next book I read in December was actually also a 5 stars, and it was Assistant to the Villain by Nicole Maehrer. This is a romantasy, but it is a more satirical romantasy. It makes fun of the typical romantasy plots. But in this book we follow Evie. She's a young woman who recently lost her job, and she's struggling with that because she's the main breadwinner in her household. And one day while she's walking through the woods, she ends up meeting this handsome man, and they get the middle of some situations, and turns out he's the local villain. And because she now knows who the local villain is, she knows who he is, she knows his name, she knows his face, she now needs to work with him, and she ends up getting a job as the assistant to the local villain, and she kind of develops a crush on the villain. And this is another book that has been on a video, so if you want to know more about my opinions on this book, highly recommend watching that video. But I just love this book. It was just so funny and was exactly what I needed to read at the time, and I'm curious about the other books in the series. I already have the sequels. I have the 2 books that are out by the time I'm filming this video, and I hope to be able to get to these books soon. And the next book that I read was also a physical book, because last year I was focusing mostly on reading through my Kindle TBR, but in December I apparently prioritized only my physical TBR. But the next book is La Chute or The Fall by Albert Camus. This is a book that won't be in any other video, but essentially in La Chute we follow this man. Turns out he's a drunk man. He used to be a lawyer in Paris. He had a very specific personality, but now he left all behind and he lives in Amsterdam and he works as a bartender apparently. And basically he's in a bar, he's a drunk, he's an alcoholic, and he basically keeps looking for people. Anyone that will listen to him, he will tell his story. And in this book we follow through the chapters as he tells his story to strangers. And the thing about this book is that many years ago I read The Stranger by Camus and I absolutely loved it. So one day when I found these books on the bookstore, I bought every single book that I could find by the author in French because I wanted to read in the original French. It has been sitting in my TBR for many years, and then I decided to pick it up, La Chute or The Fall. I didn't really know what this book was about because I wasn't really reading into what each book by Camus was about. I just knew I wanted to read every single book from the author, so I went into this book completely blind, and at first I got a little bit confused about what was going on because I had no idea what this book was about, but then I started to understand what was going on. But I'm going to be honest, I feel like a lot of the things in this book just went over my head. This is a book that maybe I will need to reread. I think it didn't help that I decided to take my time reading this book. Read a chapter here, read a chapter there. And I think this is a book that, even though it is Camus and it is made to make you think about stuff, I shouldn't have read it one chapter at a time. I should have binge read it. It might have helped with my experience with this book. But at the beginning of the book, I really enjoyed it. But the second half, I started to just feel a little bit lost. And again, I just feel like a lot of the stuff, a lot of the things in this book just went over my head. And I ended up giving it 4 stars on Goodreads, but mainly for the first part. But again, I might need to reread The Fall because it was it was interesting in the beginning, but then I just got lost. And then the last book I read in 2025 was something a little bit easier to understand, at least for me, and it was Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is essentially a second chance romance. This book has also been in a previous reading vlog. Basically in this book we follow Anne Elliot. She is a young woman who, when she was around 17 years old, she met this man and they fell in love. They got engaged, but her family didn't really approve, so they ended up breaking up. 9 years later, Anne is now 27 years old. Her beauty, people believed she's no longer as beautiful as she used to be, and also her family is no longer as wealthy because her father lives above this mean. Her father decides to rent out their property in the countryside of England so they can make the money so they can continue paying for their life, while the family moves to Bath. The countryside property is rented, and instead of going to the city with her father, she ends up staying in the neighborhood. She stays with her sister, who is not feeling well. So she's staying with her sister, and turns out that the person that rented the countryside house for her family's countryside house is the sister from the guy she used to be engaged with. And now they're back in each other's lives. That man, who is called Captain Wentworth, he completely changed his life. He's now wealthy. He has a title that comes from the military. He's worked at the military, and they are reconnecting in this book. And at the beginning of the book, I struggled to get into it because it felt quite slow, but then after a few chapters, I just really started enjoying this book, and it's Jane Austen. I really like Jane Austen. I did go into this book with high expectations just because of who the author is, but while it isn't the best Jane Austen, it isn't my favorite Jane Austen because I'm not sure if anything would be able to top Pride and Prejudice. I still really enjoyed reading Persuasion. Now let's move on to the books I read in January 2026. So the first book I finished reading in January 2026, I actually started in 2025, and it was Beg, Borrow or Steal by Sarah Adams. This is the third book in the When in Rome series, and in this book we follow Emily and Jackson, and our main characters met in college. They initially had a feud, And then after they graduated college, turns out they both got a job as primary school teachers in the same school in Emily's hometown of Rome, Kentucky. And then they continued to keep feuding. They still had a feud, but then Jack, he moved away because he was engaged. He moved on a different city to get married to his fiancée. And he was there for a few months, but after a while, he ends up breaking up with his fiancée, calling off the wedding. He decides to move back to Rome, Kentucky. And turns out that the house he bought is a house right next door to Emily. And then there is also this subplot in this book in which he is a secret best-selling author. He writes under a secret pen name. He writes these very popular mystery novels, while Emily is secretly writing a very smutty romance. And the book starts with the two of them. It starts with them playing pranks on each other because they are constantly feuding, and Emily doesn't like the fact that he's now her neighbor and he's renovating the house, so she's trying to sabotage his return to Rome, Kentucky. She's trying to turn everyone in the city against him. She's trying to make it difficult for him to renovate the house. But then during this process, they end up becoming friendly with each other. They ended up getting closer, and then one day Emilia accidentally sends her very explicit, very smutty manuscript to their very conservative and brutish principal, and then she ends up asking our male main character for help to retrieve the manuscript. And this is an enemies to lovers, rivals to lovers novel, and this book, I had really high expectations for it because I really enjoyed Practice Makes Perfect, which is the second book in the Rain Rome series, but to be honest, I feel like I would have enjoyed reading this book more if I read it in a different time in my life, because I started reading it while I was on vacation with my family. I was very busy. I was reading one page at a time. I didn't have much time to dedicate to reading, so my reading experience with this book was very scattered, and I feel like if I was in a time period in my life where I had more mental energy, more mental space, and I could sit down and enjoy this book, if I didn't take so many weeks to read one book, I might have enjoyed it more, because I do like the characters, I like their dynamic, I like their banter. This is a great romance novel. I just think I read it at the wrong time, but I still really enjoyed it. I ended up giving Back, Borrow, or Steal 4 stars because it was just such a wonderful book. I just wish I read it in a different time in my life. And if you want a great rivals to lover stories, Back, Borrow, Steal is a great option. Another book that I read while on vacation, is She Really Going Out With Him by Sophie Cousens. And I say kind of because I started reading it on the plane and then I just read like 2 chapters. But basically, in Is She Really Going Out With Him? This is such a long title, but in Is She Really Going Out With Him? It is a romance novel. It's a British rom-com, not rom-com. It's a British romance, so the main character's life is falling apart. But basically, in this novel, we follow this woman. She's the mother of 2 young children. She's also recently divorced. Her ex-husband, the relationship isn't the best. He's quite annoying. And she works for this magazine, I believe it's in Bath in England, and she works as a columnist in this lifestyle magazine. But at the beginning of the book, the owner of the magazine announces that things will need to change the magazine because they are not doing great financially. They are no longer able to make the ends meet, and basically her job is on the line because they knew the current owner of the magazine will be merging with. He doesn't really like the style of her column. So in order to keep her job, she decides to change some things about her column, make it more exciting. So she pitches for the owner of the magazine, who is also I believe the editor-in-chief of the magazine, to basically say she will go on multiple dates. I think it's 7 dates, all set up, all chosen. Her dates will be chosen by her children. and she'll find all these dates offline because she's very anti online dating. Also, an important part about our main character is that she doesn't believe in love, she doesn't want to be dating. So she's essentially just doing it for the column so she can keep her job. And another issue, something else that she's struggling with when it comes to her job, is that her rival, who is this younger hot man, everyone loves him. He's also trying to get the attention of the editor-in-chief and maybe to take over her column, and then now they're both writing a column. They're both writing this column. She's going on multiple dates chosen by her children that they find offline, while he's going on dates that mirror her experience, and he finds all his dates offline. But then there is a romance between the two of them, between our female main character and her hot younger rival. And this book has high ratings on Goodreads, and I understand why it has high ratings on Goodreads, because it's actually a good book. Like, objectively looking at it, it's a good book. I understand why people like it, but it just didn't speak with me. I ended up giving it 3 stars because the book itself, it's really nice. There isn't any problem with it. I personally wish there was a little bit more tension in the story, but overall it's just a really good book. It's just that I personally didn't enjoy it. Just for some reason didn't speak with me. And again, it might have been the time when I was reading it, or might have been the book, but it just, no. There are books that I had better experiences reading, not because this one was bad. Again, this book is not bad at all. It's just not the book for me. The next book I finished reading was The DallerGut Dream Department Store by, I think it's Miye, the name of the author. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. I believe this is a Korean author, and this is just your classic Asian cozy fiction. In this universe, the DallerGut Dream Department Store takes place in this town that is located in the human or the subconscious, and the DallerGut Dream Department Store is a department store that sells dreams to humans and animals. And in the story we are following Penny, this young woman who just got her dream job working at the DallerGut Dream Department Store, and we follow Penny as she explores this whimsical universe. She explores the art of selling dreams. She meets the very interesting, the eccentric owner of the store. She meets the people that work at the store, the clients, the dream makers, the people that create the dreams that they keep selling to people. And it's just a cozy fiction. There isn't anything magical about it, but if you are you need a palette cleanser, this might be a good book. It's magical realism, it's like cozy fantasy because there are fantasy elements, but it's more of a light fantasy elements. And I just really enjoyed reading it. I think it was great for what I needed at the time. It's just just a palette cleanser, just a feel good book, a low stakes book, and it was just what I needed at the time. And then the next book I finished reading in January was Under One Roof by Ali Hazelwood. This is the first book in the Stemnis novellas series that Ali Hazelwood wrote many years ago, which is a series of 3 novellas following 3 friends who work in STEM, and it's just a short book, a short love story, a short romance between them and the male main characters. And I read the two of the novellas, the second and the third novellas, many years ago, but Under One Roof just kept sitting there, even though it was the first novella from this collection. But I didn't read it. It was just sitting on my Kindle VR for many years. And I didn't know exactly what to read, and I just needed something that would be light and that I knew I would enjoy. And Ali Hazelwood is one of the authors that whenever I'm feeling kind of gloomy, I'm feeling not the best, or I don't know what I want to read, this is an author I tend to read because I like every single book by this author that I read. Some more than others, but I love Ali Hazelwood's writing style, her sense of humor, how she builds the characters and her stories. They just speak to me. So I ended up picking Under One Roof, which is a short novella. And in this book we follow Maehrer and Liam. Maehrer, she just inherited I think it's the childhood home from her mentor who recently passed away. The only little detail about this inheritance is that Maehrer owns half of the house. The other half is owned by her mentor's nephew. And Maehrer, she's an environmental engineer, and the nephew is a lawyer for a big oil company. And the moment they meet, it's like not going great because he already lives there. He doesn't want a roommate, but Maehrer doesn't want to sell her part of the house because she had a really close relationship with her mentor, and now they are reluctant roommates. They are always fighting, but it's a romance novel, so they will figure it out. And one thing I really enjoyed about this book was the character arc. This is a novella. This book is not long at all. It's quite short, but the character development of these characters, of the main characters, it just made this book feel longer than it is, but in a good way, because they just grow so much, and I just really enjoy reading about these characters. It's like Hazelwood. I still have to find one book by the author that I don't enjoy, so I ended up giving Under One Roof 4 stars, and again, a great book for where I was mentally at the time. After Under One Roof, the next book I finished was What the Weaver Knows by Isabel Ibanez. This is a young adult historical fantasy with not an understory. What is the word? I'm not remembering the word. With a subplot of romance. But basically, in this book, we follow Inez. She's this young woman. She's Bolivian, Argentinian. Her family, her mother is from this wealthy Bolivian family. Her father is from this even wealthier Argentinian family. Her parents essentially spend most of the year living in Egypt because they are funding her mother's brother's archaeological business. While Inez, she spends the other half of the year, actually the whole year. She only sees her parents for like half the year. But she lives in Buenos Aires, and she's part of the high society of Buenos Aires in the, I think, 1800s. And her aunt is a socialite. Inez already has essentially her whole life mapped out. She's marrying this wealthy man, and like she's a socialite in Argentina in the 1800s. But then one day her life changes overnight when she receives a letter from her uncle saying that her parents have mysteriously disappeared and they are believed to have passed away in the Egyptian desert. And then Inez, because she is a rebellious, stubborn person, she runs away and she goes to Egypt determined to figure out what happened to her parents. And the moment she gets there, she meets her uncle's handsome assistant with whom there will be a subplot of romance, but she also meets her uncle who is technically her guardian, but also they are kind of like estranged. I think she met him once in her life, but in this book we are following Inez's journey, trying to figure out what happened to her parents, and we are following her during these adventures in Egypt, going on tombs. Like, she's exploring Egypt. She joins her uncle's archaeological expeditions, and it's just an adventure novel, and the magic system is essentially through magical artifacts, magical objects that you pick it up, they do something. They have magical powers. And this was a great book. Objectively, it is a good book. After the plot twist at the end, I need to read the second book in the series, and luckily, gratefully, I do already have the second book in this duology. But I'm not going to lie, this book is young adult, and one thing I'm finding recently is that for most young adult, they are not working as much for me because I'm no longer the target audience for young adult. These books aren't written for me, and sometimes, including with What the Weaver Knows, I read it and I say, wow, this is such a great book, but if I was younger, I was going to love it. But right now, it could have been better. I feel like young adult no longer for me. I do still have some young adult fantasy on my TBR, and I will continue reading it, but it is very hit or miss. So I ended up giving it 3.75 stars, I believe. The next book, and the last book I finished reading in January, was Weyward by Emilia Hart. This is a historical fiction with magical realism slash, I would call it light fantasy, where we follow 3 generations of the Weyward family, which is a family where the women are kind of witches. And we follow 3 generations of this family. We follow Alta in the 1600s. This book, by the way, takes place in England. So we have Alta in the 1600s. She's awaiting trial because she's being accused of being a witch. So we are following this Alta side of the story. Then we have my favorite character in this whole story, which is Violet. She's a young woman in the 1940s. I believe she's 16, 17 years old. It's 1942. World War I is raging in Europe, and she's stuck in her family estate in the countryside of England, and her father is not the greatest, and her relationship with her brother at the time is quite kind of like weird because they are just in their life stage. She's still close to her brother, but her relationship with her brother seems to be changing, and she just feels like she's being suffocated by all the expectations that society places on her as a young woman in the 1940s in England. And she doesn't want her life. She just loves the outdoors. She loves animals. She wants to work as I think I forgot the name of the profession, but she wants to study animals. She wants to study more specifically insects because she loves insects. And then in the third timeline we follow Kate. I think this takes place in the 2010s, but Kate, she's running away from an abusive, not toxic, it's like a very light word. It's an abusive partner. She used to live in London. She's running away to this cottage that she inherited from her estranged great aunt, who she met once in her life. And in each of the timelines, we follow their story, the story of these characters, and it explains everything that's going on. It explains his family, and this book is essentially men treating women badly, and this is a book that you need to see the trigger warnings, to check the trigger warnings before you pick it up, because there are multiple trigger warnings, because this book is men being awful to women. And I will have a video dedicated only to this book, so I'm going to leave all my thoughts for that. But overall, I kind of like it, and Violet is the best character in this whole story. Violet and Garrett, best characters in the whole book. Now let's move on to February, which is the most recent month, the most recent books that I read in February, and let's talk about it. So the first book I finished reading was A Court of Thorns and Roses. Finally, I read A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I got this book, I believe, 2020, I don't remember if it is 2022 or 2023, I think it's 2023. And I remember I was walking around ever trying to find this book, and then I got this edition. This is an old cover of A Court of Thorns and Roses. I ended up getting a Portuguese translation. Now they republished these books. They changed the covers to that iconic red covers, but this is old cover. But basically, in A Court of Thorns and Roses, we follow Farah. She's this young woman she's the youngest of 3 sisters, and her family used to be very wealthy. They lost all her fortune, and now they live in this small cabin near the forest, the magical forest. And essentially, her family, I can't say this nicely, but essentially, Farah is the one that's keeping everyone alive, because she's the one that hunts and finds them food and finds things that they can sell so they can get money and pay for their bills and pay for food. And one day Farah goes to this forest. It's a forest near their house. It's known for being quite dangerous. It's in the middle of winter. In other seasons she wouldn't have gone to the forest, but they're hungry, they need food. So she goes into this notoriously dangerous forest trying to look for something to hunt, some animal she can kill so they can have something to eat, so they can feed themselves, and she ends up killing this wolf. What she doesn't know is that this wolf is actually a fairy, because this forest is on the border between the human lands and the fairy lands, and she ends up killing a fairy. And one day another fairy shows up at her door and says, "Hey, you killed one of my men, you killed a fairy, so now I either kill you or you come with me to my kingdom. You come with me to the fairylands, and you are going to live there, because allegedly there is a rule in the pact between the fairies and the humans where if a human kills a fairy unprompted, the fairies can take you. You find out more about that later in the book, but essentially this is the premise of A Court of Thorns and Roses. And then Feyre, she goes to Fairylands. She meets the fairies. She has a romance with a guy named Tamlin, who I'll leave all my opinions for a video that I just filmed. I don't know if it is going on before or after this video, but it is a vlog where I'm essentially just reading Romantasy for a week. Now I will leave all my opinions about ACOTAR for that. You need to wait for that video. I'm not going to talk about in this video because I talk a lot about it in that video. I have some strong opinions about ACOTAR. The next book I finished reading in February was already in a video. It was on the video where I was reading books with Winter Olympic sports, and I read The Favorites by Layne Fargo. In this book we follow Kev and Heath, Katarina and Heath. This is a Wuthering Heights retelling, if you can't already tell. But basically, Kev and Heath, they are from this, like, Heath, he comes from a foster family. Katarina comes from this middle-class family, but her parents passed away when she was young. Her guardianship ends up with her brother, he's abusive, he's an alcoholic, he is a drug addict, and he's not a great person. But Katarina, she has this dream of becoming a nice dancer, and Heath, because he's so in love with her, he goes and also decides to become a nice dancer with Katarina, and they are competing. And this book is just... Watch that video for my thoughts, because this book is just so wonderful. This was my first 5 stars of the year, and The Favorites was just so wonderful. It's like better than Wuthering Heights. It's a Wuthering Heights retelling, and in my opinion, way better than Wuthering Heights. It's just so toxic. It was like reading a magazine, a cosplay magazine, and just such a wonderful book. Even though it is toxic. It's very toxic, but I loved it and ended up giving The Favorites 5 stars. So moving on to the next book that I read, which was also for that video, and I read The Game Changer by Lana Ferguson. And in this book we follow Delilah and Ian. Delilah is a baker. Her name is literally Delilah Baker, and she has a baking show at the local food network in Boston. And the views for her show, she's a very popular TV show host, but the views are going down. But her brother, who is a hockey player, says, "Hey, we live in Boston. People here love sports. I can help you. I can use my contacts because I play for the team. We can get you like one of the hockey players to go on your show. So in this way you can attract the sports viewers to watch your show, and this way it might help with the views for your TV show, because also Delilah is worried that because her views are going down, and even though she is the most popular, she has the most popular TV show in this network, she's worried that the executives might want to cancel her show because her contract will be up for renewing. Her contract is running out. So she's worried they might cancel her show. So she pitches this idea to the network. They decide to... Network says yes, the team says yes, and the team sends one of the players to her show. But the moment the player walks into the studio, she quickly finds out it is Ian, who he's her brother's best friend. He also used to be her childhood crush. Or teenage crush. She used to have a massive crush on him. But then a few years ago, he moved out of town. They lost contact with each other. She thought she was over her crush, but the moment that man walks into the studio, her crush is back in full force. And the moment Ian walks in that studio and he sees Lila for the first time since a long time ago, he also starts feeling some things for her. And this is just a rom-com where we're following these two characters, because during the show, when they're recording the show, they clearly have a lot of chemistry. The viewers start speculating about the two. They start speculating that the two might be together, and the network and the team, they decide to use them in their advantage, and they kind of talk with them and say, hey, we can force you to date someone, but you should too, since you are really good friends, you could go out there and be seen together and just make people believe you are together, or maybe make people wonder if you are together or not. So this is a brother, best friend, childhood crush, childhood friends to lovers fake dating story, and it's a romance, and it's just your stereotypical romance. If you want to know more about my whole opinion, my full thoughts on The Game Changer, also check out that video. But let's move on to the next book in this that I finished in February, and that is The Rose Bargain by Sasha Peyton Smith. This is a young adult romantasy that takes place in Regency era England, except that the queen is a fairy, and you have like essentially it's Bridgerton with fairies. And at the beginning of the book, the fairy queen announces that one of her sons will be getting married during this season, and she needs to find the bride. So a group of young girls, they join this competition, and the catch is, if they join this competition and they try to get married to the prince, whoever wins will marry the prince, but the girls that lose this competition, they won't be able to marry. They are prohibited from marrying anyone else. And this book will also be in a video, so I won't talk much about it. But this book, it's a young adult, and it has the same problems that I had with What the River Knows, which is it's a young adult, and I'm no longer the target audience for a young adult. So while objectively I like this book, it's not the most unique premise. It's quite an interesting premise, interesting vibes, but it's still young adult, and I found myself having the same problems as I had with What the River Knows, which is I'm just not the target audience. And now I do want to read a second book in this series because it is only a duology. At least it seems to be only a duology, so we have only one book left in the series. So I do want to read that other book just to see how the story wraps up, because I didn't hate it, I just didn't love it. So I'm going to leave my full thoughts about it for the video. Now let's talk about the final book that I finished reading in February, and this one, it's like, we don't be on videos, so I ended up reading Honestly, I'm Totally Faking It by Amanda Gambill. So I don't remember exactly where I got the recommendation for this book. I think it might have been Reddit, but I remember I saw somewhere people saying, oh, this is a great book, it's a great romance novel. I added to my Kindle Unlimited library. It was sitting in my Kindle Unlimited library for months. I never picked it up, and then one day I was in the mood to girl rot and just sit down and binge read a whole book in one day. And I ended up picking this book up because it was on my Kindle library. I haven't heard anyone talk about it except about that person on Reddit. I don't really see people talking about it. I didn't know much about it. I was curious, and I was just in the mood for a funny, fluffy, easy to read book that I could binge read in one day and just girl rot. And yes, and they're picking Honestly, I'm Totally Faking It. In this story, the tropes are workplace romance, it is a fake dating, and kind of one of them is famous, I believe. So basically in this story we follow, I forgot the names, what's the name of the characters? I forgot the name of the female main character, but the name of the male main character, his first name is James, but he goes as Press, which was such a weird name. But basically, our female main character, she works as the assistant of assistants in this... It's an assistant company? An assistant agency, and she works as assistant to the assistant. She recently broke up with her boyfriend, with her longtime boyfriend, but now she's sleeping on his couch because her apartment is getting fumigated. She's sleeping on his couch for a few weeks until she can go back to her basement apartment, and she needs the money. And one day her superior arrives there in the agency for assistance agency, and says, hey, you know the client that you have who is really annoying and fires every assistant he has after like 2 weeks? Well, he fired his most recent assistant, and we need a new one. So which one of you wants to be the tribute and be like, hey, I want to be his, risk your career and become his assistant? And because our female main character really needs some money, she goes like, I offer myself as tribute kind of situation. So she's going to work as assistant to this man who is notoriously annoying, and he fires every single assistant he had after a few weeks. But before she starts working as assistant to this guy, she ends up going to this fancy party because another one of the assistants calls her and say, hey, our client, this other client, she needs a new dress because she had someone spilled a drink on her during this party, this fancy party, and I need you to come here, bring a new dress for her. And so our filming character goes there. She delivers the new dress, but in trying to get to inside the party, she ends up meeting this guy, and it's like he's the one that lets her in. And then before she leaves the party, she's hanging out at the patio, kind of like contemplating life. And then the guy that helped her get into the party shows up, and they start flirting. And then things are getting heated, and then nothing happens because someone else walks into the patio. Fast forward a few days later, or a few weeks later, she's working as assistant to this annoying guy, the client that no other assistant wants to work with. And he's out of town all the time, so she never meets him. And one day, it's raining a lot. She gets poured in, someone like, she gets, how can I say it? But when a car just goes through a puddle, so she's now covered in mud, and she arrives at the apartment of this guy, covered in mud. She needs to take a shower. She goes take a shower. When she gets out of the shower, she just starts listening to this noise, and she goes looking for this noise because she thinks she might have turned on, or someone turned on the TV. She needs to go turn it off. She opens the office door for this guy while she's only in a towel, but turns out that the sound's because her boss is at the apartment, and he's a correspondent for multiple different news networks. He's also an aspiring mayor, and essentially he's live on TV giving an interview, and she enters on his office wearing only a towel, and she gets scared when she sees the guy. Her towel kind of slips, and she's naked on live TV. And also, who turns out to be her boss, it's not an old guy as she expected, it's the guy that she was flirting with in the party. And now, because this guy, he's aspiring to be mayor, now his team says, hey, since we already have this little situation, and this guy is known for being kind of robotic and cold and not very popular, and the fact that this woman only a towel showed up while he was live on TV, that kind of humanized him a bit, and people are finding it funny and so his team says, hey, let's cash in on that. And they strike a fake dating agreement where she will continue to be his assistant. He won't fire her as long as she just goes to events and pretends to be his girlfriend, and to help boost his image, because he wants to be mayor of this mid-sized fictional town in the United States, and he wants her to help her with his image. And it's like a Grumpy Sunshine novel as well. I forgot to say about it. And basically in the story, we are just following these two characters as they're fake dating. They're showing up to the events, pretending they're together, but also they are building this friendship, and then building more than a friendship. And this is just your stereotypical romance novel. It's just a romance novel. It was great for brain rot days. But one thing about the book is that the main character, he kind of gave me the ick for one moment, for nothing exactly that he did, except that, as I said, he's an analyst. He's a political commentary analyst. And at the beginning of the book, they start talking about, he works for this network, and there's this one specific network that he works at, and it's a one network I really don't like, and I think it's a red flag, and I have blocked it from my feed because it once showed up on my feed, and then I blocked it because I don't want to see anything about this network on my feed, and he works for that network. And to continue reading this book, it was kind of let's forget about it, let's ignore that, and then we continue reading the book. But overall, it's just your average rom-com. It's just your rom-com. And I had fun, ignoring the little part, I had fun reading it, but it's nothing that stands out. It was great for the day that I wanted to just sit and girl rot and binge read a book. I ended up giving it 3 stars. This book also has quite high ratings on Goodreads, and I understand why. Like, it's not bad. But there was that one little thing about the book, just when it doesn't stand out, and there was that one little thing about the main character that kind of gave me the ick. So I ended up giving it, honestly, I'm totally faking it, 3 stars. And that's it for this video. If you read any of these books, please let me know in the comment section. Let's talk about it. What did you think about them? If there is any book you want me to read soon, please let me know in the comment section so I can prioritize it. Also, I do plan on reading Ready Player One soon. And recently, I'm going to use the end of this video, just let's talk about it, because I recently was looking through some old photos and I found a photo of the exact day where I went to the bookstore, I saw Ready Player One and wrote it down, put it on my list of books I wanted to read. One day in my life, it was a long time ago. Maybe I will show you a photo of it in a different video where I actually read Ready Player One, but it was another one of the moments where I think like the word saying, you need to read this book. Carol, it's getting ridiculous. This book has been on your TBR for almost 10 years. You need to read this book. Also, even like the YouTube AI is mocking me at this point, because on the YouTube Creator Studio, there is a little page where the AI will suggest you the AI will suggest you video ideas, and one of the video ideas is, many video ideas are reading Ready Player One, getting over my fear of red spines, finally reading Ready Player One. There are so many times the AI said to do a video where I'm reading Ready Player One, so I need to read it soon. Not sure when I will post a video, but I will be reading soon. So that's it for this video. If you liked this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel, and I hope to see you with another video very, very soon. Bye!